Alright, so I don't actually have much to say, guys, so I'm just gonna leave. Bye, guys. Bye. Wait, you want me to talk about it? Guys, this is gonna be a super short episode. This is a good episode. It's in fact a great episode. Just go watch it. Just go watch. Go. Just go watch it. This is actually really off topic. This is my notepad, my big old notepad. I get these giant 750-page things, right? You know, giant things. This is all I have left right now, which may look like a bunch, but I will probably go through this, I'd say, in the next 2 weeks. I can actually go buy new of these things. I've been saving these. You never know. Someday it might be fun to go back and look through them and be like, what the hell was I talking about? Like go back here a couple of months. What do we got here? Let's see. Dark Souls and Witcher? The what? Oh, right. These are some of my Witcher 3 notes. Alright, I'll stop screwing around. I know you hate it when I go off topic. I really don't have that much to say about this episode. It is an excellent character piece that has two very major events happen within it. The first is Londo making what is probably the biggest step back towards the side of the good guys that he has made since, God, forever, actually. This is probably the biggest step back in the course of the entire series. And the other is that Linear is gone. He's out. Peace! He is romantically infatuated with Ivanova. Wow, with Delenn. Excuse me. I'm sorry. The logic train there was that the whole quote about all love is unrequited, and that going to Ivanova to him, except it isn't actually true. But anyways. But no, Linear has this mega crush, and yeah, I'm calling it what it is, on Delenn, and bails. Now that's actually exceptionally logical, really. What's funny about this, though, is if you really look at Linear and his actions and what he's done, he's always been one of the more, and I don't have a better word for this, insidious Minbari. And he's the kind of person that, as much as he's always been a wonderful character to enjoy on the show, his absence might actually be a good thing, especially at this critical juncture. It could also be theorized that one of his reasonings for bailing was because Sheridan now has 19 years, I believe, at this point, of life left in him, and ergo needs to, he doesn't want to have her spend the remainder of her days with Sheridan and also with Linear. But no, he's leaving because heartbreak. Oh God! And I sound very derogatory and like I'm making fun, but that's just because I'm an old bitter man. I've been through that. I have, but that's also part of the reason why I make fun of that. Linear leaving is probably going to be doing wonders for him and in how he's going to be in the future. So I'm sure Linear will be doing a lot better back with the Rangers on Mimbar, and I'm sure that nothing bad will come from that. I'm sorry. Obviously, I've seen this show, right? Okay, it is funny, though, from both perspectives, because he's like, someday she'll love me, and she's like, well, of course I love him. Oh, you mean romantically? No, God, no, he's like my brother. I bet some of you out there know what that's like, too. I do as well, actually, in both directions, it's worth noting. And it's kind of one of those awkward situations that there's no real fixing. Separation usually isn't exactly a bad idea there if you can't reconcile. It was, however, very nice seeing the Linear and Vir gathering again, where the two of them... They've done this, I think, twice before now. It's not a common thing, but they imply that it's a regular thing where Vir and Linear just sit there, the two, aides of the great ambassador just sit there and... Yep. Oh, God. And then I had to do this one, and oh, God. And they talk about all the mess they've had to deal with lately. And, whoever had to deal with the worst mess is the one who wins, that kind of a thing. Of course, this time, Vir wins, so woo. Then we go to the other plot, which is the Londo plot. I do like how Delenn and Sheridan both mention how they have grown fond of Londo, and I mentioned that because that's kind of what was supposed to happen for the audience as well. Now, for some people viewing this show, Londo was awesome from day one. And I admit I am one of those people. I also know I am not alone in that. The guy, Peter Jurasik, nailed the role so perfectly and so instantly that he was always just awesome. Him and Andreas Katsoulas. Whatever issues I've had with everyone else and everyone else's acting, those two actors have always been spot on. And it's always nice to just get Andreas Katsoulas and Peter Jurasik in a room together and just let them act off of each other, which, by the way, happens several times and for quite a bit within this episode. Another good reason to recommend it. But they mentioned that, and then we go into the heart. Now, quick thing, really quick. First of all, they bother to mention why this heart attack is such an issue. It is actually effectively a kidney issue. And in real life, kidney issues tend to... I just realized... I'm not referring to my own kidney issues in the past, but including that, kidney issues tend to be pretty bad and pretty life-threatening and a little bit harder to deal with than some other issues. So it makes sense. And I do like how they take into account the alien biology and how it is significant for this. I also rather enjoy the repeated motif of do you want to live. I just want to mention that. Keep it in the back of your mind. I'm going to bring that point back and bring it around as I talk about things. I do have one complaint, and that's the use of the Dutch angle. Now, I get the Dutch angle, and I get how it's used and why it's used. And I am admittedly a little biased against it because I've actually done an analysis on Battlefield Earth, and really that's all I think I need to say on that subject. But I do feel the Dutch angle is the kind of thing that needs to be used very sparingly, and I honestly feel like it's not necessary in several aspects. For example, in this episode, we see Londo walking through a thing like, is Delenn here? No, we have gone immediately from a scene from him lying in bed to him walking around looking for him. So we know immediately that this is Londo either on some kind of spirit journey or delusionating within his own brain or hallucinating or whatever. This is something internalized. The Dutch angle is not required to get across that point. And later there's a scene where we see Vir, the real Vir. This is actually a great directing bit with this one exception, where Vir's like, hey! And then Vir walks off and is all lamenting in this one long shot, goes through a door closes, the lighting changes, and Londo walks out. Now that is a great shot, except then he goes to the Dutch angle, which is utterly unnecessary. This is just my opinion, but I don't think it adds anything to the scene. We already know what's going on, and the lighting change was more than sufficient to get across the visual disparity, because that's usually what a Dutch angle is used for, to make something literally, physically look visually different, so that you can be like, aha, something's going on, or something's different, or something's off kilter, more or less literally, or whatever, right? I don't think that was necessary in this case. It's the only flaw I could point out. But anyways, let's move on. So then we see Delenn. Now, Delenn... actually, I'm sorry, before I get into that, I want to talk about one thing really quick. It's funny to me, I don't know how bad this is now, but as of, let's say, about 6 years ago and about 15 years prior to that, yeah, that's about right, people have been very casual about the actual effects of stress. Now, obviously, stress is a bad thing. Most people understand that. But one of the things that was very common, and I saw this professionally, I saw this personally, I saw this amongst other people that I either worked with or were my family or my friends, where they would be insulted, basically, oh, God, I'm super stressed and I've got all this stuff going on, and the response would be, oh, get over it. I mean, I know you're stressed, but that's no excuse, right? And just looking at stress as if it's some kind of normal, ordinary, not really a big deal thing, right? But it is. In fact, it's a huge deal. I mean, we actually know quite a bit medically about what stress actually does to you. It's not pleasant. And the more you're under and the longer you're under it, the worse it gets. And the harder it is to reverse, actually. So I actually like how this episode pretty much straight up shows that the stress, which I'll talk about more later, has been causing Londo to basically deteriorate in terms of his health over the course of however many years it's been now since things really started getting bad and a man named Mr. Morden entered his life. I do like that. So then we get to Delenn. Now, Delenn asks her question, do you want to live? I already mentioned that. And the obviousness of that question is present in hindsight, but at the time, I admit, I'm looking, what's the relevance of that? Of course he wants to live. I mean, what's the significance? Who cares, right? I mean, if you ask, excuse me, do you want to live, to just about anyone in the world, their answer is probably going to be yes. And even if their answer is no, under certain circumstances, they might still say yes. People tend to behave differently when their lives are actually threatened as opposed to when they are thinking about them, thinking about death, right? And again, personal experience on this one. So, then we go to Sheridan. Now, they do a nice bit with Sheridan, where he starts off in his original uniform, and then he goes to the outfit he wore when he was in between jobs, then his new uniform, and then he goes to the Entilza robes that the Minbari tend to have. Nice little bit of visual presentation there. Of course, Londo doesn't comment on it at all, and why would he? It's his vision, dream. I'll talk about that in a second. But it is a nice way to demonstrate how Sheridan's arc has been going, and will continue to go. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about that now, but I mean, I think the implications are obvious. And there's this great bit, and this is so weird because of the Dutch angle thing I just mentioned, but there's this great bit of directing where the camera just kind of, and you have to turn around, and the camera keeps shifting, and G'Kar is just standing there, and Londo's like, no, I can't. I can't, do you understand? I can't. And he can't do it. I love it. And then it goes to Vir, who is, of course, asking him not to die. Please don't die. And Londo's like, no, it's ridiculous. Vir says something interesting that I don't like in fiction, for reasons I've already discussed many times. But he says, a prophecy that comes true... actually, I forget exactly how he phrases it. But basically, a prophecy that comes true is a prophecy. But a prophecy that doesn't come true was just a dream. I don't like that because as a writer and as a consumer of fiction, I prefer it if you're going to have something that is a prophecy, it needs to be correct. Because otherwise, why are you even adding it other than for false tension? I've actually already talked about that concept when it comes to Bab 5, and indeed that will actually come up again twice in Season 5. But I digress. Vir talks to him, and you see as we go through these, Delenn, Sheridan, and then Vir. All of the people who are close to him, with actually one exception, Garibaldi. It is actually a damned shame Garibaldi was not involved, since Garibaldi was, his one real friend for quite a bit of his career there. But then we get to G'Kar. Now, first of all, I just want to mention that the fact that G'Kar came to watch him, to see if he was okay, says so much about how much G'Kar has managed to let go of the animosity and how much the two have managed to build a bridge between each other. That sounds kind of simple and normal, by our standards, but we know how the Narn are, and we know how G'Kar is in particular. This is a man who was almost willing to die just to hold on to his pride. Now that sounds like a negative thing, but I don't mean it as one. That is just how important his code, his morals, his ethics, his concepts of what is and what should and shouldn't be are to him. So for him to be willing to walk into that room and watch there with all the other concerned overlookers to see if Londo is going to survive, that says so much without saying a word. And that brings me to my main point. We've kind of already reached it. Like I said, not a lot to talk about. Londo refuses to turn around because he is actually an ethical, moral individual. Now, this is not actually news. We've kind of seen this before. He is someone who, through bitter experience and years of recrimination, both self and external, and through being forced to be a politician, not an anti-politician, but a basic, regular politician, has layers upon layers of cynicism, just coating that individual. Every now and again, we've seen Londo peek out of that blubber, and I've been pointing it out as we've been going through the series. But here we see someone who is sorry. Now, the significance of this cannot be understated. or overstated, excuse me. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Because it is a world of difference. They even say this flat out in the episode. To be sorry for getting caught or sorry for doing something. Londo is sorry for doing it. Londo is sorry for what he did. There's a wonderful bit where G'Kar is there, and G'Kar is talking to him. And he says, one word. It's all that was required of you, one word. And Londo says it wouldn't do anything. Now, before we go on to the conversation, let's pause right there. Because Londo is absolutely right. Londo could not stop G'Kar's torture at the hands of Emperor Cartagia. He couldn't. He could have begged on his knees, and it probably would have made things worse. And he knew that, and so he stood there, and he watched in silence and horror, because the expert, cynical, bitter politician, the old man who had suffered through so much, knew he was powerless. And yet, then we continue the conversation, as G'Kar says, it doesn't matter if it would have stopped it. It doesn't matter. You had a moral obligation to express your outrage. And I love that because that is, as we've seen throughout this series, exactly how G'Kar feels and how Londo feels. The only difference between the two is the level of cynicism and bitterness that stands in the way. That's it. Londo there are many ways to interpret this episode, so I admit I'm going to start getting into interpretation basically right now. And G'Kar himself flat out said this could be a hallucination, this could be you talking to yourself, this could be you talking to some fragment of me left over from that psychic attack from, God, like a year ago at this point. It is my interpretation, and I'd love to hear your guys about that. As ever, I would love to hear your interpretation of what's happening here. But it is my interpretation that Londo is having a conversation with himself. That he's not literally talking to his own conscience. He's just talking to himself. Kind of similar to what happened with Franklin some time ago, if you'll remember. So based on that interpretation, what we see here is that it's not just G'Kar who believes in that ideal of you should express your outrage, you should speak up. You said nothing. What did Londo say as he stood there and watched as they destroyed the world? He was aghast, horrified, but he didn't say anything. What happened when he was, as he's watching G'Kar, and we see it again in this episode, he's mouthing, please, please, and he's just struggling and shaking, oh my God, please. But he didn't actually say anything. You can tell the truly moral people by the fact that they are their most harsh judges. And Londo hates himself. He hates himself for not saying anything. He hates himself for not expressing his outrage. He hates himself for not trying. Yes, he couldn't succeed, but he didn't even try. And the kind of person who feels bad about that is a very different person than someone who feels bad about getting caught. It is a wonderful, amazing, and powerful series of scenes, pretty much from the moment that G'Kar and Londo start really interacting with each other to the end point, when Londo's life is saved, and he gets up, and the first thing he says to G'Kar is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And G'Kar is moved to tears, smiling, nodding, just because G'Kar understands what that means. I have asked before if Londo Mollari deserves redemption, or should be redeemed, or can be redeemed, because the very concept of redemption is actually dependent on the individual. So we can't even have a set basic series of rules in order to actually discuss the outer edges of the problem. We can't even get to the base level of the problem of whether redemption even exists or not. But in my opinion, this right here is why I say Londo should be, deserves to be redeemed. because he internally, without anyone expressing this on him, without anyone forcing this on him, he hates himself, and he grieves, and he is sorry for what he did. Not for getting caught. Not because it would have done anything. Because he did everything he could, and he knows that. But despite knowing, logically and intellectually, that he did everything he could in order to make things work out, and worked his ass off, and was willing to lay down his life to make it happen. Despite all of that, he still feels sorry for it. He still grieves for it. And it has been exactly what has been causing him all that stress, because he hasn't been able to deal with it. He has been incapable. Do you have to drive right by here? Hang on. I'm not editing this out. Out of spite, I'm not editing this out. He has been incapable of dealing with this. He has been incapable of enduring that guilt of how bad he feels, of how sorry he feels, of how much he hates himself for what he didn't do and for what he did do. And so he has locked it away and just chained it away, and that has been gnawing at him ever since. And that's another type of stress. And that type of stress will kill you. In real life, that has actually been shown to really be a thing. Quick anecdote right at the end here. I have a headache today. I'm doing my best to do these ruminations despite it. I hope I've been decently good. The last couple of episodes plus this, and hopefully the next couple of episodes will be still headache land. But this is not a complaint. But this episode actually drove me to tears. And I was just like, oh my God. Now that's significant because I have a headache. And it makes my headache worse to cry. So despite the fact that I was significantly motivated not to cry, the episode still evoked tears within me. Because goddamn, it's a good one. Go watch it. I'm out of here. Oh, right. I'll see you next time, guys.